Hi, this is Norman Kochannek here from Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochannek. I'm blessed to be able to have time today on such an auspicious day when India have won an amazing 2-1 series here in Brisbane. They've done a fantastic job with the likes of Punt scoring 89, Gill 91, and of course Shardul Thakur, who would be my choice of man of the match, having taken 3 wickets and 4 wickets in this match, as well as a fantastic 67. We'll push that to one side for the moment. We've got a gentleman here who is esteemed gentleman indeed, an Indian of great note in Australia and I'm sure back home. I don't think there's a person actually that lives in Australia who has got the word cricket in their relationship that doesn't know this gentleman. He's incredibly well connected, but for the right reasons, through dignity and honesty, and the most respected man I've ever come across, especially when it comes to the work of charitable foundations, such as the LBW Trust and the Chappell Foundation, and many more activities. Everyone goes to this man when they want advice and help and mentorship and what he has actually produced in this country. His name is Darshak Mehta, and he is here today in his lovely home in Mosman in Sydney. As you can see behind, we've got a view of Sydney Harbour. Quite a nice view to say the least, and I'm very honoured to have the gentleman here. Welcome, Darshak.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your very kind words. I don't deserve them.
A typical comment from someone who does deserve them, by all means. The fact is, there's many things I can talk about. What we're going to do, we'll start with your journey from coming to India to Australia. What brought you to Australia?
Well, I came here about 33 years ago, 1988. Our eldest daughter had just been born. I wanted to live and work in a more competitive country, branch out on my own, not just follow the old script of following our family business. So, and I loved Australia. So
it's a very good
found
reason.
myself here.
Very good reason to be here. But that journey in 1988, at a time where Indian cricket probably wasn't as pronounced as it is now.
No, it wasn't.
And especially in Australia, I don't think there weren't large Indian communities at this time.
Not at that time.
No. It's a very interesting, and look at it now. Australia has a distinct Indian population. They're well ingrained in Australian society. They've contributed amazingly, and more importantly, some of the best cricketers now we have in this country, like Jason Sangha. That we've got incredible players that are actually now playing for Australia in that mode. Now, Darshak, let's take a step back now and look at your involvement with two very well-known trusts here, namely the LBW Trust, and on top of that, the Chappell Foundation. Tell me a bit about those two.
I knew Peter Roebuck for a long time, the journalist, and one day Peter invited me and a handful of other people to his Bondi home, and I didn't really know what the agenda was. It was supposed to be a barbecue. I protested that I was vegetarian. He said he'd find something for me too as well. Anyway, during the course of the evening, we got chatting about what his own charitable commitments and activities were. And I made the mistake of telling him, why don't we formalize it? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you should form a charitable foundation and raise funds and divert money to all these young men and women whose education you are so bothered about in the developing world. So the next thing I knew, there were people from the big four accounting firms, from a leading solicitors firm, and we formed the LBW Trust. LBW is, of course, a play on words. The real meaning of LBW is learning for a better world.
Wow.
And we formed that in 2006. My co-founders were Peter Roebuck, journalist Mike Coward, and solicitor Peter Strain. So the four of us co-founded it, and we had our first board meeting, and my bad luck, I ended up as being the guy with the corporate and experience and perhaps the connections. So they made me chairman, and I was the inaugural chairman and served as chairman for 10 years. And so
Amazing.
that's how we got going. So the trust, when I finished up, we were educating about 3,000 young men and women in 8 developing cricket playing countries: India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Nepal, South Africa, Jamaica, and I forget, I think it was Tanzania. So, we've even improved on that. It's great to say the LBW Trust is going very well. And I am now a patron, so I don't have to work there anymore. So that is as far as the trust goes. The trust educates about 1,500 of its 3,000 students in India.
Wow.
And they are meant to be tertiary and university educated, and these are young men and women who we'd like to think that if it wasn't for us, they would be depriving themselves of further education, of tertiary education.
I mean, just for our viewers, the likes of, you mentioned Peter Roebuck and Mike Howard, two of the most esteemed journalists, basically, certainly out of Australia. Yeah. Peter Roebuck, of course, is English, having played county cricket, but based himself in Australia and was very much esteemed here. Unfortunately, he passed away. Jimmy Maxwell told me that whole event was terrible there in South Africa. But both Peter and Mike Howard, who's still well and truly here, were two amazing ambassadors, but they found the man that had the visionary approach, namely
because
yourself.
We had a very good team, and of course we had patrons from the topmost tiers of Australian public life and society. People like the Governor General, Sir Peter Cosgrove, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Ian McFarlane, well-known businessman Malcolm Speed from the ICC was also a patron. Of course, Greg Chappell was a patron, is still a patron. So we had a great collection of people who trusted us to do the right thing and to advance the cause for which we were set up.
Amazing. And from an incredible base as the LBW Trust has had and still has, you made a decision to expand upon that and move to another chapter, namely the Chappell Foundation.
Yes, look, I had 10 years there at LBW, and for a year or two my wife wasn't keeping too well, so I begged to be excused from LBW and passed the baton on to a couple of our directors there. And after she got well again, I'm a serial offender. So I was, talking to Greg, saying that to Greg Chappell, saying that, the Chappell family should be involved in something, because you guys are doing so much and yet, you're not at the forefront. And we couldn't quite agree on the cause for which we should set up the foundation. And we disagreed for a few months, and then we finally, both Greg and I, agreed that youth homelessness in Australia was at unacceptable levels, and if we started off an organization to help charities which were at the forefront, which were at the coalface in helping them, with fundraising and with advocacy, we would be doing our job. And since the last 3 years that we have been going, we have raised over $3.5 million and helped about 8 organizations and are still doing so. And it has gone well, and we have again the support of a lot of very good people. Peter Lawler from the Australian, Malcolm Knox from the Australian, Lisa Stalekar, the former captain, women's team captain, Peter Alford, formerly a business editor of the Australian. Some very prominent, some very good people are involved in our team, on our board of directors. So I am only a part of the team that is running the foundation. But we are very proud of what we've been able to achieve.
And I think he's underplaying the fact that he's the glue of this organisation. It wouldn't have reached this level no matter what. All these people come to help him naturally. And of course, the Chappell family, both Greg and Trevor in particular,
and Ian
as well, all three are heavily involved, and hats off to you. It's a magnificent effort.
Thank you.
And again, the connections of Darshak to Australia is amazing, especially from a cricket fraternity perspective. People flock to him, and it's not based on nothing else, but decency and honesty is a major factor that brings anyone together, and you've proven that. So
Maybe it's a little bit of the passion. They see the madman in me,
well, that's probably the case too, but we won't go down that track.
just like you.
Just like me. Exactly. Now, they're two major aspects of Darshak's life, but there's a lot more than just simply that. There's been involvement with cricket itself. Now, tell us a bit about your cricketing prowesses.
Well, I did play for the Cricket Club of India, the CCI in Bombay. I had the dubious distinction of being amongst the 3 cricketers who had never played first-class cricket in the teams, in a couple of the teams that I played with. So contemporaries of mine would have included at various times cricketers like Sandeep Patil, Ravi Shastri, Milind Rege. They're all legendary cricketers, and we used to have a very good team. So I did play for the CCI. The best I ever was I made it to the 25 of the Bombay under 22s, and this would have been in way back in the late 70s, in 1977. So I did not make it to the final side, but it was a very strong team, and I was very happy that I made it there to that. And of course, I've played for various distinguished clubs in Bombay like Matunga Gymkhana, etc.
And here?
Out here, I tried out for Mosman in the first grade, and that year was the year when Phil de Freitas, the English seamer, was going to be pro. But they insisted that I should turn up for practice, as they should, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, twice a week. And just a month prior to that, I had started off my factory, my business, recycling factory, which I couldn't leave and come here for practice. So I had to give up competitive cricket without playing first grade in Sydney. But I kept on playing city and suburban cricket, park cricket in Sydney. There's no such thing as social cricket in Sydney. Australians take their game very seriously, as Norm, you would know.
I certainly did.
And I also played for a local Indian team called the Indo-Australian Cricket Club, IACC, who are still all very close friends. So to qualify there, you have to have one parent born in the Indian subcontinent. Most of them have both parents born in the Indian subcontinent. So I played for and with them for about 20 years.
Fantastic.
And I led a club called the Nondescripts, who I took from obscurity to anonymity
Well
in the
known.
1990s.
Very well known here. All right, well, I must get you to grab a couple of your hats. What hats have you got there?
This is, of course, the Cricket Club of India hat, my proudest, which is the CCI, Bombay. Brabant Stadium is our home ground. And a lot of you may recognize this hat, which I'm not qualified to even hold it in my hand, but somehow it has been given to me by somebody who I cannot name. This is the Indian cap. It was given to me in 1999.
Wow. Very special prize possession. Now, there's some great aspects of Darshak's life. Now, obviously, with what's transpired, now, just to put a bit of background to this, Darshak was approached by Chris Barrett from the Sydney Morning Herald about the situation that has occurred, of course, in the third test, where they had 2 if not 3 days of racial slurs and racial commentary from the crowd that obviously disturbed the likes of Siraj and Bumrah, and quite frankly, probably the whole fabric of the game was quite disturbed by that. It was very unfortunate. Admittedly, there's a lot of conjecture as to what was actually said, the words that were said. It doesn't matter. It's never acceptable to be abusing players, whether they're the highest level or a lower level. The fact is that shouldn't happen. And Darshak talked about his own personal experiences here in Australia with Chris Barrett in that newspaper article. And if you don't mind, I'd love you to share some of your thoughts about the situation, in particular from an Indian perspective. As you all know, I had plenty of interactions with you about this, and we had discussed certain matters, and we were quite disgusted with what we saw. Not that we want to go on with it any further, but it is worth at least discussing it from your perspective, Darshak, what you can talk about.
Well, look, for a long time, cricket here is played hard. It's not merely in Australia, cricket is not merely played with bat and ball, it is also played with the mouth. So there is always been an element of a banter. Now that can get out of hand, and it rarely does, but it can get out of hand in suburban cricket. People give as good as they get, but most people respect the boundaries and leave whatever is said on the field. That may well be true, but there is also something that I discovered which I wasn't quite comfortable about, and that is that spectators tend to get involved in the game by making loud remarks which are not particularly complimentary of people who they see as wanting to bring down a notch. Particularly game are the opposition team. The touring teams seem to cop a lot of comments from the concourses of cricket grounds all over Australia, and certainly in my experience I have always seen a little bit of that at the SCG. It's not always racial, but it's always unnecessary, and it is quite disrespectful because most cricketers play cricket. It is a sport and they are giving it their all. They are trying their best. They are entertainers. They are playing for their country. They play with pride. And to knock people like that, to insult people like that, is, in my opinion, not just unfair, but to do it, from the safety of the stands and with the safety of numbers is cowardly. And what doesn't help is that a lot of these people have been out in the sun, are with friends, have been on their alcohol spree, drinking one round of beer after the other, and they are definitely not free. They don't have any inhibitions left anymore, and so things do get out of hand.
Now, I mean, there was well documented evidence of certain words that they claim were said, such as the words brown dog and even the word monkey, but even something as simple as the word grub. It's an Australian colloquial slang, but it doesn't matter. It by someone as simple in the situation as Mohammed Siraj, hearing those words, it's offensive and it shouldn't happen.
And it's unnecessary.
Unnecessary as well.
And also context, grub may be acceptable in Australian society, but everyone's idea of the word grub and its usage and around the context of its usage may not necessarily be so. And so why, I don't understand why there is this keenness for crowds to support their team by knocking visiting a touring team who are guests in our country.
It's true.
It's totally unnecessary, and it's extremely discourteous and rude.
Exactly, and it just makes the victory that's happened in this Indian series, the 2-1 victory that we've experienced today, even more remarkable. That someone like Mohammed Siraj, despite the barrage of abuse he copped in the last game, came out in this game and took 5 wickets. The Shardul Thakur's came out and scored 3 wickets and 4 wickets in 67. The Washington Sundars came out and performed admirably, and very distinguished players and well spoken and very respectable to an Australian audience. They didn't reciprocate by saying something bad back. They did the right thing, and I believe it was handled in the end correctly, going to the umpires and bringing it to their attention. Admittedly, in terms of action, that is fines, bans and prosecutions, that hasn't quite eventuated at this point, and there's not much precedence in that way either, which to me has to happen. And I've made a very clear statement that in the previous messages that we've talked about with our viewers, the reality is they should be prosecuted where appropriate. That means a fine, and certainly banning from the ground, and probably from ever going to that ground again. A few months is not worthy of anything. The actual the actual prosecution by way of a jail sentence it's in the Act. It's there. It stands as is at 6 months with a $10,000 fine. But it has never been. There's no precedence of it actually being enacted. And it needs a special set of circumstances to be agreed by the Governor General, or I'm not sure the exact titling, but it's actually something which is quite a step to get to and has not been enacted. And on top of that, you look at the situation that occurred where they protested against the Adani, Adani mining, and the Australians, they were Australians, protested for an elongated period on the SCG. It took an age for anyone to come on. Even when they did, security didn't manhandle them. They basically escorted them very slowly and very freely off the ground while they were still protesting against the Adani mines, which seems to be a bit of an inconsistency there as to, I wonder, I hate to say this, but I wonder if it was someone of a non-Australian background and it was in the reverse, so they were talking about another type of mining, what would have actually transpired. But yet, I won't get on that track. The reality is, we do need to wake up to ourselves and note this, and as magnificent Darshak, the esteemed gentleman that he is, has been able to talk about it here today.
The positive thing, if I may
Yes.
just add to your comments, is that Cricket Australia and the ground authorities like the SCG and other ground authorities are taking it seriously. It's not like they are ignoring it. This is more a societal issue. It is a cultural issue. And there will need to be some examples set, some re-education needs to take place. And it is also a behavioral issue. So, it is I take it as a positive that, Cricket Australia wants to stamp it out. The Sydney Cricket Ground Trust wants to stamp it out, and they are doing their best. They are not giving up. They are trying to find the offenders and are going to pursue it. So that is good to know from an Indian Australian point of view, and probably for Indian viewers to know, and for the Indian cricket team to know.
And that's a very good point. I should add to that and agree totally that the way that Cricket Australia handle it, Cricket New South Wales, the state government here in New South Wales, as well as our police force and the security venue staff at the SCG Trust, clamped down on it very quickly, interrogated and was on top of the issue very quickly once that matter was sorted. And I'm impressed with the way that the whole level, especially the umpires, they handle it brilliantly. They actually bothered to stop the game and address it there and then, which would not necessarily have happened before.
Correct.
So that's a great result. But it's great to be able to hear that perspective, and I wanted to bring that to our viewers because I know that you've asked me many a time about this matter, and it's great to hear it from an Indian that's been here as well.
We should all not forget something, that racism exists in every country in the world. I know, I have experienced this as well, and I know that India can be as racist as Australia can be. So please, save me the sanctimony, people. There are good elements in every country. There are bad elements in every country. And this is not something which is an institutional problem per se, but it is definitely a societal, a behavioral issue which will be solved because there is a will to solve it.
Fantastic. That's a great way to end this discussion. Thank you for your time, Darshak. It's been magnificent.
Great pleasure, Norman, and good on you.
My pleasure. Everyone, I'll be talking to you very soon with other great people such as Darshak Mehta. And this is Norman Kochannek yet again on Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochannek.